Welcome to Kenya Lens Media, where we give you news updates and political analysis. Kindly, if you are new here, consider subscribing. Now, the former Public Service Cabinet Secretary Moses Kuria has reignited political debate in Kenya after publicly expressing regret over the impeachment of the former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, arguing that the removal weakened the political influence of the Mount Kenya region. Speaking during a televised morning interview on February 17, 2026, Kuria said he misses the period when Gachagua served as the deputy president, describing him as a leader who listened to regional concerns and defended Mount Kenya's interests within the government. The remarks come at a point of heightened political maneuvering ahead of the 2027 general election, with alliances shifting and the future of the deputy presidency emerging as a sensitive point in national politics. His statements are different from what he said before the impeachment of Gachagua. In fact, he is among the leaders who advocated for the impeachment, and he showed happiness when he was impeached. So a sudden change of tune indicates there are secrets, or rather there are some secretive meetings and talks, perhaps of the truce between Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua. So Kuria's comments have quickly drawn attention across Kenya's political landscape, reopening questions about regional power balance, loyalty within the ruling coalition, and broader implications of Gachagua's dramatic fall from office. In his interview, Kuria framed Gachagua's impeachment as a turning point that diluted Mount Kenya's bargaining power in national leadership. According to the former Gatundu South MP, the region previously enjoyed a stronger representation at the highest levels of government. Kuria argued that Gachagua played a critical role as a political buffer within the administration of President William Ruto, suggesting that the former deputy president often pushed back against decisions that could have disadvantaged the vote-rich Mount Kenya bloc. The former cabinet secretary portrayed Gachagua as accessible and consultative, contrasting that period with what he described as growing unease within the region's political ranks today. His remarks appeared carefully calibrated to resonate with Mount Kenya votes, many of whom remain politically influential and are closely watching succession dynamics ahead of the 2027. Political analysts also note that Kuria's intervention is unlikely to be accidental. Instead, it reflects the early stages of positioning by key figures seeking to shape regional narratives before the next electoral cycle gains full momentum. There are two options here. Is either Moses Kuria wants to run a seat and now wants to get a soft spot from the Mount Kenya region, or he has been sent by William Ruto to try to soften the language and also to soften the air between Rigathi Gachagua and William Ruto. At the time, supporters of the impeachment argued it was necessary for governance and accountability. Critics, however, viewed it as politically motivated purge that risked alienating Mount Kenya voters who had overwhelmingly backed the Kenya Kwanza coalition in the 2022 election. Kuria's latest remarks revived the unsolved debate by emphasizing the regional strength was reduced. He's effectively framing the impeachment not merely as the individual political setback, but as a collective regional loss. This framing could have significant implications, and in Kenya's electoral politics, perceptions of regional marginalization often become powerful mobilizing tools, especially in the run-up to general elections. Kuria's comments come amid intensifying speculation over the future of the deputy presidency as party quietly begins positioning for 2027. The current deputy president Kithure Kindiki has already signaled that the seat is occupied and not open for negotiation. His allies have pushed back strongly against suggestions that the position could be reassigned through political bargaining. However, uncertainty has grown following reports of possible cooperation between factions within the opposition Orange Democratic Movement and the ruling United Democratic Alliance. Any such arrangements could reshape the calculus of the power sharing within the government. Within Mount Kenya region, leaders appear increasingly sensitive to signals that the region's traditional hold on the deputy presidency could be challenged. Kuria's intervention therefore fits into a broader pattern of political messaging aimed at safeguarding regional influence. Beyond high-level power struggles, Kuria also emphasized Gachagua's role in sector-specific reforms, particularly in the coffee industry, a critical economic pillar in Mount Kenya counties. During his tenure, Gachagua frequently positioned himself as a defender of smallholder farmers, especially in the coffee and tea sectors. Kuria suggested that the former deputy president actively engaged stakeholders and pushed for reforms that would benefit local producers. For many voters in central Kenya, economic issues, particularly farm gate prices, cooperative governance, and market access, remain more immediately important than elite political contests. By highlighting these bread and butter concerns, Kuria appears to be anchoring his message in everyday economic realities rather than abstract political theory. Analysts also say this approach could resonate strongly if economic pressures continue to bite in the coming years. Kuria's public nostalgia for the Gachagua era also hints at deeper undercurrents within Kenya Kwanza-aligned politics. Although Kuria did not directly criticize the current administration, his remarks suggested an ease about the direction of internal power dynamics. Such carefully worded interventions are common in Kenyan politics, where leaders often communicate strategic messages indirectly. Equally, observers note three possible interpretations of Kuria's move. One, it may be an attempt to rebuild breaches with Gachagua's political base. Two, it could be a signal early positioning for Mount Kenya kingpin status ahead of the 2027, or it may reflect a genuine concern among some leaders that regional unity is fragmenting and therefore trying to bring the truce between Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua. Whichever the case, the timing is significant. Kenya's political temperature typically begins rising about 2 years before general election, and 2026 appears to mark the beginning of the familiar cycle. To understand the weight of Kuria's remarks, it is necessary to consider Mount Kenya's long-standing role in national politics. For decades, the region has been one of the most influential voting blocs, often determining the outcome of presidential elections. And from the era of Jomo Kenyatta through the presidency of Uhuru Kenyatta, Mount Kenya has frequently occupied the center of political power. However, the 2022 election marked a partial shift, and while the region strongly backed President Ruto, the broader coalition politics of Kenya Kwanza meant that power had to be shared across multiple regional constituencies. Gachagua's impeachment therefore carried symbolic weight beyond the individual office holder. For some observers in Mount Kenya, it raised questions about whether the region's influence within the coalition remained secure. As Kenya moves gradually towards the next general election, the debate sparked by Kuria is likely to intensify rather than fade, and several factors will shape the trajectory, such as economic performance and cost of living pressures, coalition stability within the ruling alliance, opposition reorganization and possible mergers, and finally the regional unity within Mount Kenya region. If perceptions grow that the region is losing influence, and then political entrepreneurs may find fertile ground for mobilization. Conversely, if the government maintains strong engagement within Mount Kenya leaders and voters, the issue could lose urgency. And for now, Kuria's remarks serve as an early warning signal that the battle for Mount Kenya's political loyalty is quietly underway. The renewed focus on Rigathi Gachagua's political legacy is not merely about one former deputy president. It reflects the deeper questions about power sharing, regional equity, and coalition management in Kenya's evolving political system. Mount Kenya remains one of the country's most decisive electoral blocs. Any perception of marginalization, whether real or politically constructed, has a potential to reshape national alliances ahead of the 2027 Kuria's intervention suggests that influential leaders are already testing a narrative that could redefine the next election cycle, and by framing Gachagua's removal as weakening or rather weakening of regional strength, the former cabinet secretary has injected fresh energy into unresolved political conversation. Whether this develops into full-scale political movement will develop on how both government and opposition figures respond in the months ahead. But one conclusion is already clear: the struggle over Mount Kenya's political future has begun earlier than many expected, and its outcome could play a decisive role in Kenya's next chapter of leadership.